and it's 9:30, so we'll jump into it. The goal is to discuss really, I see as a really sensitive, possibly even diplomatic type policy moving forward when it comes to the coronavirus and also with public health orders. And my goal is to kind of get some feedback on what the best way forward would be as far as making a plan in situations where, really worst case situations, situations that we hope don't really come up. So I'll just start off with letting everyone log on before. I'll start off with not getting ahead of myself. What's up, Mr. Miles? How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm cold.
This is nothing.
Is that right? Where are you from originally?
From New England originally.
Of course.
I'm built for this.
Walk in the park.
Yeah, exactly. I wore shorts today. You just yeah. No, it gets the cold here is a different type of cold. It's like a piercing, like to your bones, like type cold. It's dry. In New England, it's like a wet snow cold. It's less harsh on you. But yeah.
It's a mean cold here.
Is what?
It's a mean cold here.
Yeah. It's like cold with an attitude. Like it's angry at you. It wants to hurt you. Like New England, it just kind of wants you to wear boots. So yeah, I don't know. But we'll take it. The cost living in the best city in the world. So. All right, cool. Wow, this is great. I really appreciate this level of turnout on literally a last minute discussion. So first I'm going to start off by saying, and I already mentioned some of this, this I think is delicate. So my goal as far as creating types of policy that we might be leaning towards, I do have on Tuesday, I put on the agenda a discussion about this type of policy for the council to be out in the open. And but it's during what we call a workshop, which means nothing is being voted on, nothing's moving forward. It's just to have an open dialogue and discussion. Before we get there, though, I want to talk to our business community about pretty much a couple things that other cities are doing and some background on Wichita when some of the stuff that we've had over the last few months when it came to enforcing public health orders and try to figure out what would be a good game plan if we had I guess bad actors, so that if that comes up, we're not scrambling right at the last minute. And I'll just kind of open up with this. We know that the coronavirus will likely, the numbers will spike because people are going indoors and it's getting cold out. The modeling and the medical professionals say, hey, we're going to see a spike. And we also know that in doing so, people are going to be indoors more. We want to protect our economy to the best we can and not have a massive or swath sector shutdown numbers get out of control. And then you have Dr. Menz who shuts down all the bars, right? And then we have people who are punished who are doing things right because a few people aren't doing things right. So when we look over our ordinances here at the city level, we really don't have anything or any real mechanism to kind of to have teeth for policy for enforcing coronavirus or public health orders, which right now is all coronavirus orders. We don't have any teeth in enforcement of orders. We can only enforce ordinances. So by letting our mask ordinance expire and go back to the county level, now it becomes an order, which is tough for us to enforce if we need to. I'm not saying we need to enforce masks, but really any orders coming out. In the beginning of this, and this is rare, but we had situations where we had, I think it was a auction. I think it was even reported, like an indoor auction business who just said, we pretty much think you can't enforce any of these orders, so we're going to pack 500 people into a small room and do these orders, right? And do our business. We were able to use education and talk that person kind of down from doing that. But in those situations, that causes super spreader events, which has a bad impact on the entire economy, and it hurts people who are doing it right. So I wanted to start the discussion on what it would look like to have, with the health orders, what the city's role is to be a good partner in ensuring that we set up boundaries and rules that once, and if we have bad actors, we can take some type of, some type of action to not punish, but try to get people on the right track, so that we don't have another big economic sector shutdown like we did earlier, where they shut down all the bars, or they shut down all the gyms, or we don't want that, right? Like we want to be able to not have a few bad actors actually influence or hurt all of us. So I wanted to start that off, but I was also going to tell you there's really 3 methods out there that other cities have done. And then once I explain these briefly, then we can open up and kind of talk about it. One is what Lawrence has done, which is more of a, I call it like a aspirational model, where what they did is their city liquor license ordinance, they took the statute for what is it? It was a statute for nonsense. What is it called? Nuance. It's the anyways. They took this statute for public nuisance statute, and they put it in their liquor license, and pretty much that statute it refers to public health and maintaining public health in general, and it could be interpreted as, if you have a liquor license, the spirit of the ordinance is that you have to keep people healthy. We don't want, you got to wash your hands, you got to follow public health or practices. And that also, by adding that statutory language, encompasses a public health order, right? Now, the difference is, if we did that, it's more aspirational, because it's almost non-enforceable. You can't really move fast if you have someone in direct defiance. But people respond really well when you say, like, hey, as part of the conditions of having a license is you have to also follow this guideline. So that's one way that Lawrence did this, and they had success with it, even though they don't have to really enforce it. Because most people, once it's there, they get it. Now they get like, okay, well, I did sign up for this. Now I understand that these are the conditions to sign up for it. The other one is what Topeka is doing. So Topeka actually has a collaborative 3-strike system, and we had an email from one of our members, Joey, who also kind of indicated a 3-strike system is where she would lean towards, where Topeka has a partnership with their county, who, just like our county, runs public health stuff, where if you are in open defiance, this is for any business at all, or any public entity. If you're in open defiance, the first of a public health order, you get a verbal warning, right? And education, where it's like, hey, this is what's supposed to be happening for the first offense. Second offense, you get like a written notice with the information needed there. Also, the educational information. And then third offense, they shut you down for 24 hours. But the partnership is the city actually kind of administers that warning in that letter. And then on the third offense, which someone gets and I guess they've already had to use once, then they kind of kick off the process. They hand it off to the county health doctor, who has the ability, through their superpowers as the health doctor, just to shut down a place for 24 hours. And if they do it again, if they continue to do the offense, then they can keep shutting them down for 24 hours. But usually people get it after that. So that's kind of like this 3-strike approach, where you pretty much actively have to just be in defiance to the point where you almost want to be a martyr at that point. All right. Like, you have all the ways to kind of push yourself out. That's much more of a process that's enforceable. And then a third method would be to do that without partnering with the county, but having the chief have either the fire chief or the police chief, which we both have in our ordinance. We have some precedents for the fire chief be able to, or fire marshal, shut down a place that's over capacity. The chief can shut down a place that's not following health health ordinances, where the 3-strike rule would allow them to shut down a business for 24 hours. And of course, it's due process. People can appeal, but it's 24 hours, so it's kind of redundant. I mean, they'll be out of jail by that time. So that's kind of the 2 processes, but 3 different plans that have been kind of floating around out there to encourage people to kind of fall in line with healthcare or with these health orders during this time. So I wanted to share those and kind of see some feedback. What do people think? And also we could tighten stuff up. Like, the goal is to not have to use these, but if we have to, if we have some bad actors, to have a plan in place so that, we're not letting anyone else down. So just want to open up. What do we think?
So,
Go ahead.
Go with Shannon, then we'll go with Adam, and then I think Felicia is also jumping in. So Shannon, Adam, and then Mr. Spain, your box lit up, so you get third. Ready, Shannon?
cool. I just was curious I know when the conversation topic of compliance and enforcement came up at the beginning of all of this, PD and fire, both city and county, were very much hands off. We're not gonna do any of that. Have there been any conversations since they would be the ones enforcing those things and shutting places down or issuing tickets or anything like that? Has there been any conversation with those players to see if they're on board with any of this?
So the good question. They don't. So the police have been pretty much the ones going out educating. Like, the very first shutdown, when I cited the place that wanted to continue their live in-person auctions, that took like a couple visits with the police, and then and they educated. The police go out and inspect Old Town, close down Old Town and the bars now, and that's why they've been kind of the deliverers of the information. They hate it though. They've written like 3 tickets, and it was only to places that, like, after talking to management who understood that they were in defiance of the health order by staying open late. Like these people were pretty much acknowledged that they wanted to break the health order, and then they got a $25 ticket, like 3 of them total. Like, this is not something that would be massively enforced at all. So to your question, have we invited them into that conversation and say, hey, what could your role be? No, right now I want to talk to you guys first. This is the first day of the conversation, right? And then we have this weekend, and then Tuesday, hopefully we can have a good discussion with the council. And really, it's just trying to figure out, is there something we want to do moving forward? I'm the type of guy where I have a plan if things go bad, right? So hopefully we never have to, hopefully everyone's on board on keeping our economy open by following the same standards and having a level playing field. But if not, that's where we're at. So I would, after this, these conversations with the business community, go out to the chiefs, both of them, the fire, and say, this is kind of what people want. How's the best way to implement this, and what's your role if we were to implement it? So the short answer, no, I haven't talked to them yet. But from my experience, no one likes enforcing these health orders. No one likes enforcing any of this stuff. And that's why it really hasn't been heavily enforced. Like, mostly education does it.
Okay.
Adam, what do you got?
I got a few things. I mean, first of all, I think the term bad actor is kind of a generalization for a large group of people that you don't really know their motivation for what they're doing. So I would advise against using that term. There's a lot of people that have personal guarantees on their businesses that might just be trying to survive right now, and doing that in a way that is seen as non-compliance. I understand, but I also understand the other side of it. So, saying that they're just bad actors and throwing everybody into the same boat, I think is going to lead down a path that none of us want to go down. Excuse me. There's a lot of people that are facing some really stark situations right now. So,
we know of people who are losing houses due to the inability to be open. even if it's a partial capacity, that's still killing revenue. And again, we're not saying that places should be fully open. We're not supportive of that at all. But if something like that is going to be discussed, there needs to be some kind of financial compensation put in place. This is eminent domain.
Yes.
And in no other circumstance that I can think of in the past, would that be acceptable to just force someone to close, but give them no compensation, while at the same time threatening them with further financial straits by fines. It's a very slippery slope, I think, that could be very, very detrimental to a lot of people for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I think it's the wrong path. I mean, I don't think cracking down on people that are just trying to survive is a good idea at all. It's a powder keg.
So, all right, and that might be
the other thing where is, the cost of enforcement. I mean, again, you're looking at a lot of businesses that have received little or no help and assistance through this, and that are, again, facing going out of business and losing all of their assets. So, and then you look at the enforcement cost, and especially given this day and age, if we're putting more money into law enforcement and less money into the community, I think that's a bad idea. The next thing is, we agree there shouldn't be large gatherings. Totally on board with that, but you have to help people. So instead of putting money into enforcement, maybe we put into money into helping people stay closed and not losing their houses. I mean, I think that's an idea that we might need to really look at, and that's something that I think people could get behind and feel good about. Andy just brought it up in the chat, but I was going to say the Lawrence model is terrible. They also allowed non-bars to open up and sell liquor, which is killing the bars that are able to open. There's a big lawsuit against the city of Lawrence because of this. They're mishandling this as well, as many cities are across the country. The other thing is, putting all of the onus on the business, especially ones that serve alcohol, is a little extreme, especially given that when a person has one or two drinks and everybody's different. So no matter how good the bartender is, you serve somebody one or two drinks, they might be hammered immediately, whereas somebody can have 5 or 10 drinks and be fine. So once a person is intoxicated, expecting them to be reasonable in any sense puts a lot of pressure on the businesses, many of which are very good at doing that. But in this day and age, when the smallest little action could be perceived as a threat, that's a lot. And so I think there needs to be some thought on the community as a whole, and individuals' role in this. Other than that, I think the other thing is, again, assistance for businesses to stay closed and licensing forgiveness. I mean, that's something that the city has power to do.
And Chicago is doing this right now. They're waiving licensing fees for the foreseeable future.
For drinking establishments. Drinking establishments specifically pay a ton in business licenses to the city and the state. So just giving relief to people that are already struggling and barely making it or not making it at all is another option. But I think approaching this as authoritarian is a bad idea. I think approaching this as a community together is the way we need to do it. And unless we approach it that way, it's all going to go to shit. I'm sorry for my language, but that's how it's going to be.
So let me just ask this then. All right. First off, I'm not suggesting we do what Lawrence did, which Lawrence actually shut down all the bars and then paid them to be shut down, from my understanding, with CARES Act money. What they did is, by putting the nuisance language into the ordinance, it made it so that people understood that in addition to public health orders also need to be taken into account. Because as you guys know, when you sign up for a bar license or a liquor license, you are signing up to uphold public health. In our ordinance, we actually reference the nuisance ordinance and the nuisance statute. We already kick out to section 14 is like also the nuisance stuff. Now, but there's another thing here that you're mentioning, and I think that this is very valid, and that's why we got to talk about this. Is, do we want to get away from almost demonizing bars, right? Like, because there are a lot of really good people doing things right, and by kind of messing with, I think, the liquor ordinance, which, like I said, I think that was the policy. From a policy standpoint, it seems like the kind of easiest fix, because you're just saying, by the way, this also counts as public health. But from a political standpoint, like, are we piling on top of this industry that's already paid a high price? So should there be more, like, just anyone who's just in defiance, right? If you are someone who is I don't know, selling stuff, and you brought everyone into a room, 500 people into one small room, after Dr. Menz just said you can only have 100 people in a room because our coronavirus numbers are now at 25%. Should we be able to step in and say this is dangerous for our entire community? But that would actually take the pressure off bars and restaurants, right? Like, so
by default, they're gonna catch the brunt of it anyway, because most of those places aren't the volume and they don't have the liquor involvement. And on the flip side, you have the city of Wichita giving out permits, and I'm not in disagreement with this, but to things like Prairie Fire Marathon and Oktoberfest and all these other large gatherings that have way more than 500 people in it. So I think there needs to be more uniformity as well on all ends, but the bars are definitely being demonized, but I don't think any business should be demonized. I think businesses should be looked at as valuable assets in the community and worked with. I don't think looking at
what
them,
if they're breaking a law?
People,
like, that's the other thing too, is like, what if we actually, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here, because I get pushback from the healthcare community. I get nurses have saw 2/3 more death this year than any other year they've ever worked. As coronavirus goes up, they can't change the visitation policy because nurses are the ones dying with strangers. So they still want visitors there so the nurses don't have to keep dealing with that. So they're still my constituents. And then also I have employees who might be out working, and if the employer isn't keeping a safe environment, like an open defiance, and an employee gets sick, if they have health insurance, their deductible is gone if they have to go to the hospital. That's $5,000. If they don't have a health insurance and a $5,000 deductible, if they're lucky, their house is gone. They're in bankruptcy. So that's the other side too, is like, we could say, hey, we're going to not have a game plan if we have people who I would call bad actors. If you are in full defiance, where and the bad actors I'm talking about are the ones who went to the press and actually said, we refuse to follow the law. Like, they actually said that. Those ones, like, you are now trying to you're trying to defy the law. Do we then try to enforce this for the good of the public, or do we back off? Like, so, and if you guys tell me, hey, we should back off and not, try to enforce any law and order, then then cool. Like, I can do that. I could just sit on my hands. I just don't feel like that's.
So I'm not saying that we need to support people that are openly defiant. I'm not saying that we need to socially gather. We've been closed at Wave and Cotillion since March 16th, and we haven't opened.
Yeah, we're not trying to say that we think everything should go back to normal. We're just saying that our whole entire system is so incredibly broken that I don't know any good way forward that's not going to cause either enormous economic destruction or enormous loss of life.
So here's the deal, is we're saying closed, and we believe that that's the right thing to do, and we want to do anything we can to mitigate spread. We have supported mask ordinances. We publicly stated that. We have done numerous things to try to help this through, but at the same time, we've gotten very little assistance from the government, which we're supporting. So at some point, and we're just 1-2 businesses, so at some point, we're going to reach a cliff where there's no more money in our bank account, and we either have to sell, let the Cotillion be demolished, into a parking lot, and let Wave go to Live Nation or something, an out-of-state company, and then move away. And so, when we look at it, we're like, okay, we have money to last until then, and then we have to reopen and do something. And reopening at a partial capacity is going to lose even more money for us. So the other thing, that when you're saying businesses that are doing the right thing, they are doing the right thing, but I guarantee most of them aren't making any money, and a lot of them might be losing money. And there's a cliff that's approaching, and there's a cliff for everybody, and it's a drastic cliff, and people will do crazy things when they get there. And
yeah,
so
if you
all
don't
I
know
am
how you're
saying,
going to feed your baby tomorrow, You're
you're
gonna do
gonna
what you
go,
have to
yeah,
do.
and nobody. I mean, the people I'm talking about don't want to help the spread. They want to support the medical community. They want to support the government. They want to support any measure we can to get back to business. But at some point, people are going to reach that cliff, and it's going to be a bad situation. And
Yeah.
if we're dumping more restrictions and more threats of enforcement upon them at that time, it's going to be a bad deal for everybody. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm not saying we should reopen. I'm not saying we should do this, but I'm saying we need to have a very deep conversation about the government's role in this and businesses' role in this and how the two can actually work together beyond the normal mode of operation that we've been in, because the normal mode of operation that we've been in isn't working.
Right.
So,
And that's all.
and I agree 1,000%. I wish that we had, like, if we're going to ask people to, as businesses, to take a financial hit in for the cause of public health, right? Because we have a virus that is killing folks. You got to be able to compensate them. Like, I'm with you 1,000% on that. Some cities or counties have been able to do that using CARES Act money. Some haven't. I am disgusted with Washington, who hasn't been able to come up with a plan right now. I don't care whose fault it is, right? Like, I'm with you 1,000%. My goal, though, is as a local elected official, and why we're having this conversation, and this should be a tough conversation. And I caution anyone who comes in here thinking they have the answer, right? Like, because the reality is there's a lot of dynamics here, and we got to have this conversation. And even if the conversation results in us doing nothing because it's too complex for us to take it, to take action, cool. But the I can't tell you how much how much I understand this sucks. This is awful. I hear from people all day about this, and we don't have at the city level the ability to issue checks. That's the county, and supposedly they motion to put money aside, or they're looking into it. I don't know. I'm not in that branch. But I agree with
the county saying it's the state's saying it's the feds. Nobody can do anything, and that's the problem. And that's what I'm trying to address here. And I don't think we can just say we can't do it and then move on to let's enforce. Like, we need to have a deeper conversation of how we can get to somewhere where businesses are actually being assisted.
Well, not only
Go ahead, Felicia. Sorry.
not only that, I mean, think about, I'm sure most of you already know, the state ran out of money. I mean, they had so many people apply for that grant. I think, was it over 7,000 businesses or something? And there is thousands that didn't get that help. And like you guys said earlier, we all know people that are starting to lose their homes or have already lost their home or had to move, shut down their businesses. The problem I'm having is I feel like there's a group that's just being extremely targeted. And I think what some people don't realize, as a business owner, you cannot dictate your views to other people, no matter how much you believe in them. You cannot make somebody do something because you think that's the right thing to do, because you're going to risk getting in an altercation with somebody or having people picket your place of business, or there are multiple things that you have to think of there. And my biggest problem with this, I really do feel like there's a group of people being targeted about this, and they're trying. And even the ones who aren't trying, like you guys said earlier, when you're trying to figure out how to save your house and take care of your children, what are people left to do with here? I mean, there's got to be a better way. And I agree also with the finger pointing. There's got to be a better way to get along. I mean, there just has to be. There's got to be a way for people to calmly come together and figure out a solution, because I mean, we've got a great community here. There's got to be a better way with this, because the small businesses are just really hurting, and everyone says, oh, sorry, our funds have run out, or you just have too many people. And again, winter's coming and people are trying to figure out what to do. And I think the biggest problem there, again, is when push comes to shove and you've got to feed your kids, you're going to shove back. It's just reality.
So I want to just point out the finger pointing, I agree, is what we're trying to avoid, right? The White House task force on coronavirus has targeted that when you hit to 10% or more of positive testing, that bars, nightclubs, and gyms should be immediately shut down. So that's why they are usually the ones brought up in conversations, is because the White House task force has set that as, this is what you should do. Now, here in Wichita, and for the first 3 months of this council, the targets were really salons. Like, they were saying the same things about salons, and then salons really, they were offended, to be honest, and they wound up creating really good practices that made it so we're not seeing salons at risk, right? Like, the overwhelming case studies have shown that even people with coronavirus without knowing it who enter salons, they're not spreading it. Like, the mask wearing, the social distancing, the sanitation, they got that under control. And I would argue that here in Wichita, the medical community has deemed our gyms as more safer than the medical community in Texas has deemed their gyms, right? Like, people are stepping up and really, I think, taking the challenge on this. So the finger pointing at that stuff, it's usually coming from, if not the CDC, the White House task force. Like, that's what started this. My goal here, though, I like I said, I wish I was in a position where we can talk about, and maybe I wrote this down, liquor license relief. I've talked to Bob about that. Maybe we can do some stuff about that. And maybe even, I think there was discussion about helping out if people are paying for parking rent, like paying a city for parking garage stuff. Is there stuff we could do to offer some relief? That's not what you all need more, and I get that. My perspective, though, is the long-term goal, where if this thing blows up, we're at 25%, we're at 30%, people won't be going out, like, at all. There will be less economic activity, right? Like, the point of this is to preserve our economy without having a big swath shutdown from the legislature or from Dr. Mintz. Like, what can we do to get everyone on the same page? So if there are people who are creating super spreader events at a time where we're at our very worst, because we're gonna spike. We're already spiking. Like, what can we do to kind of get everyone back into, we're all in this together, we're all gotta get through this? Like, that's what's our role? Or do we not have a role? Is it that, hey, there's nothing we can do, we're just gonna have to ride it out? Like, is that?
Sorry. I don't think that any of the people who are on this call, and the majority of the business owners that I know, we're not having issues with the businesses who are able to open having mask mandates and enforcing masks and doing all of that. I think the focus doesn't need to be on the businesses enforcing these and fining businesses or shutting them down. Sorry. I think that if we're going to do enforcing, I don't think anyone needs to be educated about this. I think everyone knows you need to wear a mask and why you need to wear a mask. But if we're going to do any kind of enforcing and working with law enforcement to help us with that, that needs to be out to the general public. I mean, you can go into any restaurant and watch people walk in without a mask, even though there's a big sign that's red and says masks required. If you've got events that are going on, the event organizers, it would not take that much for a fire inspector to swing by the event and see if masks are being enforced. If they're not, then the event organizers and the people who are attending those events need to be told in some way, whether it's a warning, and then, first time is a $25 fine to an individual is going to be a lot more effective than a $25 fine to a business. So if we're going to enforce, you guys sat through 7.5, 8 hours of people telling you why they were not going to wear a mask. Those are the individuals that are helping with the spread and helping keep businesses like Adams and Jesse's and mine closed. And so if we're going to do some sort of enforcing and some sort of mandate like that, I think it needs to be with the general public. Community needs to be brought in and said, hey, you have to do these things or we're never going to be able to get to full capacity. We're never going to be able to open Wave again or the Cotillion again. Like, those are the things that need to be focused on. And then if our municipalities, if the city and the county and the state could work together to advocate for the small businesses to help us be able to get the money to pay our rent and not get to that point where we're desperate and trying to figure out how we're going to put food on the table or pay the electric bill. I think those are going to be the steps that are going to be more effective and more helpful than saying, well, bars are the problem or salons are the problem or events are the problem. So.
Hey, I'm gonna chime in here. I'm on the phone, so nobody can see my face, but this is Janelle, by the way. I think that there was a point made right there, which is that punishing the businesses really doesn't do any good, because I think what we're dealing with here is mandating individual behavior, which it starts right there, and that leads to the bigger problem that you're dealing with. And how do you regulate that individual's behavior? I think if there's a way to try to, because at the end of the day, if you've got one person that says, I'm not going to wear that mask, then it snowballs from there. So I'm not sure who was just speaking, but a $25 fine to a business is nothing or everything. But if you're a person who gets a $25 fine because you're at an event that could potentially be a super spreader event, well, that might have a little bit more of a personal impact. You might not like that you have to wear a mask because you got a $25 fine, but it's kind of like getting a speeding ticket, right? So if we're really serious about getting people to understand the impact of that, for people who are continually in violation, then you're either going to have to increase that education and awareness. And signs on doors of businesses doesn't do anything. You're either going to have to find some way to increase education through billboards, TV, whatever you have to do, promotion like that, or you're going to have to do enforcement and punishment. So I think it starts at the individual level. That's just my opinion.
So just going to throw this out there, we've signed no tickets that I know of for individuals. It's tougher to enforce that. And just to use the speed limit, I guess, example, is we all kind of speed, right? Like, let's be real. Like, we've all in the last couple of months have probably gone a couple miles over the speed limit at least once or twice. The question here is, and I get it, we should get everyone following the speed limit. We should get everyone being safe, because it's not just about you might crash, but you might crash into someone else and you might cause them problems. What I'm focused on and where I want to go is, should we be doing more to shut down drag races, right? If there is someone who is actually organizing a drag race that could cost lives, should we be focused on the organizer of the drag race or the people who show up to the drag race? And that's what I mean by this, where, like, I'm not trying to say we need overarching policy that hurts a restaurant where someone comes in, takes off their mask, refuses to put it back on. Like, that's not what we're talking about. But if someone creates an event that is going to be a super spreader event, right? If they are creating a dangerous environment and they know it, they're in full defiance of the ordinance, should they get a letter? Should they get maybe a verbal warning? And then if they continue to do it for a third time, should they be shut down for 24 hours to think about not doing that again? Like, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about like ripping businesses away from people. We're talking about super spreader type events that people have organized, under the guise of whatever LLC or business they're with. And they say, we don't care if this is going to hurt people. But that's different. And I want to say this is very different than, letting 10 extra people in beyond the capacity because, this is a business and you need the money. Like, that's kind of what I'm focused on. So I want to make that clear that we're not trying to do more policing on this. Should we set up a system where if someone, like, early on is just in complete defiance, we can actually send them letters and tell them that there could be consequences if they continue? Or do we not? Or do we just kind of let it play out?
Well, what is your definition of event that's a super spreader then? I mean, is it defined by the number of people that are going? Is it defined by the proximity that they're sitting in? I mean, what exactly makes that?
I mean, probably be defined by the medical health expert, depending on the numbers, our test positive numbers are and what, the limits are. Like, and a lot of this isn't so much about mass. I'm wondering also about limits, right? Like, so if they say, hey, we got to go 50% capacity because we're at 25% testing rate. And like I said, God forbid this ever happens. Like, we don't want this to happen, right? But if it did, and then at the same time, we have someone who wants to take advantage of, I guess, the economic climate where everyone's following that, and they say, hey, we're going to host this big event just to defy it. Now we got someone who's 200% over capacity, and all those people go back into the community and get other people sick. Like, should there be a mechanism
if they were to host a big event, they need to get permits and all that. So I mean, you guys have the ability to stop that before it even starts. If they do it in defiance.
Excuse me, I'm going to interject. There are plenty of bars in Old Town, and I think I won't say plenty, but there are certainly bars in Old Town that we all know of that are totally disregarding this order, that are running business as usual and plan to continue to do that. That is difficult for businesses that are trying to abide by the ordinance. It also makes it difficult with customers when you try to explain to them how they should be acting, and they're able to go next door and do whatever they want. I agree that this is difficult, and there's a lot of tough decisions that have to be made, and you're balancing the economy and people's livelihoods versus a public health ordinance, which is also very important. So I mean, these are difficult decisions, but there are bad actors, and we know who they are.
So I just sent a copy to you on
deciding how to enforce.
I saw that.
Deciding how to enforce the ordinance is important. But also, I would say, just jumping off of Shannon's point about education,
they got to figure out how
is that one thing that might help is to ask the police officers to wear masks. I mean, they've come into my facility multiple times without masks on, so I don't know. We're asking them to educate the public, but they're not really abiding by the mask order either.
I get a lot of that, by the way. I get a lot of like, hey, I was pulled over, this guy's not wearing a mask, get your house in order. So just throwing that out there. Go ahead.
What's the proposed cost of administering this type of enforcement?
The proposed cost of administering,
everything costs money. If we come up with a new idea and concept of enforcement, then it's going to have a price tag to it.
So it could, yeah. So, and that's the thing. It depends what we do, right? Like, if the goal is deterrent, where like the people who went in the paper and actually, I think the people Brooke's talking about, and actually said, we are going to be in defiance because our lawyers tell us there's no way of enforcement, there's no negative side besides bad press for us not to do this. Like, and we say, no, there's deterrent. Is that that doesn't cost us anything, right? If it really just depends on if how bad things get, I guess, where it doesn't really cost us much to do letters or verbal warnings. We've been doing that this whole time. So I don't know. That's a good question. From my understanding, the reason why the police have been handling this instead of like the fire department is already out. It's not costing us.
How they're going to finish 2021 and 22.
I think somebody's mute came off.
Yeah, I think it's Becky. Becky, you're mute.
That as I think the conversation that turned to kind of like, should it be on the individual or the business? I mean, I think that it is tough, and definitely in a customer service environment, from my perspective, where normally I would be focused on letting my customers kind of, do whatever they want and meet their needs. Things have definitely changed for us, given, the mask rules, and there's definitely people out there, individuals who don't want to follow the rules. But I do think that as a business owner, we've all taken on more responsibility, and that doesn't give us a free pass to break the rules. That means that we have to work within the laws. And I think that, bars have come up a lot as an example. And I think from a service perspective, they're kind of an interesting example because they're a place where there are already lots of rules to enter, and they already have security set up at the door to check your ID. You can't really, it's different than, say, a coffee shop already, just as you experience it during a normal time. And so I would push back against also the idea that there's nothing that the business can do. I think actually they probably already have employees who are trained in enforcement and dealing with people when they're intoxicated. So I also don't think that that's a valid excuse. And I think that the education, the warnings, and then actually closing them down would be, I think that would be fair. I do think as a business owner, we are responsible for our employees, our customer, and our community at large. And it is hard right now, but that doesn't mean that it's okay to put people in danger, I don't think.
So the couple things I just want to recap, just make sure we're getting policy moving forward should not have anything to do with liquor licensing or anything that could pile on to a negative impact on bars, but more global policy. Is that, I know what Sarah said where, hey, we're, when you have a liquor license, you do have more, I think, more.
Yeah, but I think as any business, we all have taken on responsibility to have employees, to have people in our space. We all have licenses. I mean, I have health inspections. I mean, and I know for salons and gyms, we all have our responsibility. But yeah. Okay, so, and I can pull back from any type of discussion on, because I've had some draft legislation made where, like public health also included public health orders with licensing of bars and restaurants. We could pull back on that if we do move forward with any type of policy talk where that's not. And like I said, that's more the inspirational or aspirational type goals, right? Where we kind of sign up for this. But I kind of agree, and Adam, you can chime in here, that it also feels like it kind of kicking an industry when it's down, because I think there's like I said, I think this came from the White House task force when we become a red zone, but there is already, I think, bad stigma associated undeservingly with bars not being safe. So if we have policy discussion on this, is it fair to say that the advice would be more global discussion, if anything moves forward, less targeted to like an industry?
Is there any plan on enforcing reporting of infection? I know that's been a big issue, especially with, let's move out of the small business community and go into the large business community for a second and look at places like Walmart and Dillon's and all these big businesses that there's big infection rates and they're not reporting it. They're telling their employees not to report it. I think that's a bigger spread than any of our small businesses combined.
Yeah,
so
we're hearing from former employees, as you know, we don't have any anymore, but some have been lucky enough to get jobs at some of these larger businesses, and we're hearing from them, employees are being told very specifically to not report this. And it's such a horrible feeling when all of us small businesses are having to deal with so much, and we're bearing the brunt of it. Well, these larger corporations, it seems like, are getting a free pass.
Yeah, and when we look at what's worked, what's stopped spread, it is masks and it is social distancing and limiting social gatherings, but it's also contact tracing and knowing when there's an infection. And without that, we're not going to get anywhere. So no matter how many mandates we put on local small businesses and how much enforcement we do to them, if Home Depot is packing people in and their employees are getting sick and their customers are getting sick, we're nowhere. So let's talk about the whole business community for a second and see what the plan there is, because I think this needs to include something that has to do with contact tracing and reporting.
Well, and to touch on that, I know I have heard that this county has tried to do contact tracing, but there weren't enough people available. Something that I had wanted to do, I had this grand theory that the government would actually care about small businesses and help us out. And my plan had been to rehire the bulk of my core staff and then have them do contact tracing while I pay them. Would there be any way, because I know the city didn't get me CARES money, would there be any way to creatively reallocate something within the budget? Because I know some parts of the budget did grow dramatically this year. Would it be possible to maybe, reallocate that, and then some of these businesses who are just trying to survive, again, I know that some of these bars are just being assholes, right? But there's some of us who are truly just trying to survive. Could some of those funds be reallocated that maybe we could utilize to pay our bills, and, people could, and have that pay then be utilized?
Part of the solution, pretty much. Can we contract out and
that could help a business, that could help the community?
They're doing it across the country, San Francisco and a few other. There's actually part of the. Did we freeze up?
So Lacey Cruz, in the beginning of this, set aside a bunch of, in the beginning of I think some shutdowns or something was going on, set aside a bunch of jobs that were like immediately hires or necessary. And I'm messing this up. It was a long time ago, and they were for people who were going to be out of work during the shutdown, right? Like, so there has been some thought towards something like that. What you're suggesting, I think, we need to bring in more county folks and try to integrate CARES Act money and plug people into like an overall strategy. And the strategy is changing, by the way. Once we have rapid testing, things are going to get a lot easier, I think. So, but yeah, good point. And I do want to just kind of point out, the goal here isn't just to hinder small businesses. The goal is to help small businesses. The goal is to ensure that if we have orders coming out that they're not, small businesses aren't disproportionately targeted by the city or the county. I mean, keep in mind, Dr. Mintz can just shut down businesses without having any type of process if he chooses to. The county can. They can do that. My goal is to get out in front and to say, let's make sure that there's a fair process, because, Walmart's is affected differently than Sarah's affected, right? Like, there's a cash flows and equity situation where large businesses kind of weather some of this a little better than small businesses can. 1 in 6 small businesses are going under right now. So what do we do to do two things? To ensure fairness, that people aren't being called out or, I guess, unfairly targeted, and also ensure that we do our part to make it so that people will still go out and feel confident and comfortable going out to partake in our local economy. And if numbers spike or people don't feel safe, I don't want any more bad stories, right? Like, last meeting we had, we talked about how we got to be talking about the stories where people are doing things right. Like, where are the places that my wife and I can go eat where we can feel confident that the staff in the background making food are wearing masks, that they're doing everything they can to keep everyone healthy. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is how do we make sure that we don't have the people who I think are doing everything they can, who are suffering, that they're not also targeted with like a big swath policy. Is there a way we could avoid that by having more micro policy? If you have people who set up drag races, right? Like I said, like really, like literally the worst offenders, the type who are just creating a dangerous environment, but they're doing so in a way where they're bragging about it because they think, look at me, there's no repercussions I will face for this, and I don't care. Like, those are the people I want to discourage.
I agree with that, but also, maybe it's a hotline or something that, an employee at Dillon's can call and be like, hey, my coworker got infected and they didn't report it. I think we need that, to me, that's just as much of a drag race as it is or an old town that's just throwing caution to the wind and opening up. Suppressing information that then hinders the public health is a big problem. And so, I think if we're looking at enforcement on businesses, we need to look at something that is enforceable in that regard as well. Because I know probably everybody on this call, if one of your employees gets sick with COVID, you're probably shutting down, and you're taking it real seriously. Whereas there's a lot of businesses within our community that aren't small businesses that aren't shutting down, and they're going even harder and faster and not reporting it. And so, we need to take a look at that. And we need to take a serious, hard look at that. And we need to, I mean, I assume you guys would have the power to enforce something like that as well. So we need to take that on.
And Mayor, do you mind if I weigh in here?
Yeah, please do, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, first of all, to participate, and really appreciate hearing everyone's comments. So I'll just make a few quick ones and then put myself back on mute. But I think one thing to remember, and it's been said here, but I don't think bars and restaurants should be singled out. I think they are easy targets in some ways, but I don't think they've been shown to be the problem in Kansas. And same thing with gyms as well. The current clusters, and I know it's just, looking back a couple of weeks, but it's healthcare and schools, some of the other places you might think of that are actually the clusters. And I don't think even statewide we've had that many for bars. So, and that's been said, but just wanted to reiterate that. Another point, which I think was sort of referenced earlier, Andrew shared the link about Lawrence being sued. I think if there's going to be some kind of a structure put in place for shutting down businesses, there needs to be due process in that. And I know you mentioned the 24-hour shutdown. So by the point we get to due process, it might already be over. But I don't think that's probably a good way to go. There needs to be a way for business owners to make their case and appeal and whatever else. And then the third and fourth things I'd mention, I guess, is one, we talked about the county, and just a question that can be answered or addressed maybe later is, have we talked to the Board of Health about their enforcement, or what they're doing on this? I know it's a little bit different from what the city has done, and so I think maybe letting the county at least have some space to say what they're planning on doing or what they're currently doing would be good. And I guess the fourth thing goes along with the bars and restaurants. I don't know that not singling out bars and restaurants means we should shut down everyone. I don't know that fixes the problem. Like, sure, don't single out bars and restaurants, but expanding it and saying we should shut down everybody, I think it'd be best to work with businesses who are trying to do the right thing. And in some cases, people are going to do what people are going to do, and it's hard to enforce everything with your customers. And sure, to what Sarah said, businesses are enforcing other things. So I think most businesses in Wichita and Sedgwick County are doing their best to do that. But, I think requiring them to be shut down because of what their customers are doing is going to lead to people losing their houses and not being able to feed their kids, like Adam and Jesse were talking about. So we'll just make those comments and appreciate everyone's input.
Yeah. And I just want to add, I agree, we shouldn't be, and I don't know how to say this any easier, right? This is the problem with politics, is it's tough to say something and mean something because people hear it differently. The whole point of this is to not shut down people, is to not have a massive shutdown, is to not get to that economic downturn that we've had, right? The whole point of this is to figure out, can we figure out a way to get folks kind of back on track so they're not shut down. And so they're not, sorry, woman. Yeah, it's a motion light. And so they're not, they're not putting themselves or their employees or other people at risk. So, and that's why, I think we're leaning towards maybe a letter process, and very last, because at the point where you get 2 letters or a verbal warning, a letter, and the letter says what you're doing has been deemed unsafe or a violation. I mean, we could trigger then a due process. And then, and in the end, I think we should probably lean, I agree with Andrew on this, with the County Board of Health, and that's what Topeka's done, right? Where the city has the manpower to kind of enforce some of this stuff, where they can go out and kind of report back or follow up on complaints. And then they report that to the Board of Health. And then if, there is, like I said, the worst case type folks, then are those folks, then it's in Dr. Min's court at that point, right? It's up to the health person already already has that ability. So, I mean, moving forward, we might not need an ordinance change. We just might need a collaborative agreement, right, with the county. And that's what that's if we go that direction. So, again, I'm just trying to start this conversation. It's a really hard conversation because as soon as you start talking like this, you get people who say they want to shut down the economy, or you get people who say they care more about businesses than healthcare workers, or like you get the jump on both sides. And I get that. My goal though is to figure out to have a tough conversation and to figure out how we're going to get through this together with the least death, sickness, and illness to our economy. So that's where I'm coming with this. And it sounds like some of the takeaways are going to be do not pile on a sector that's already been piled on, right? Like do something. If we do anything, set up a system, it's going to be wider than that. Due process, lots of due process, and ability to get back on the right track. This is what I'm going to report back, by the way, to the council, where if this conversation doesn't turn into a mudslinging fight, we actually have a decent conversation on Tuesday. This is what my takeaways were. Don't target one sector at all, because even talking about that sector disproportionately hurts them. Lots and lots of due process. And it sounds like the look towards what we can do to help suffering businesses with liquor license, what's in our realm. That's super reasonable, right? If we're going to ask people of stuff, we should also be willing to give. And then also partner with the Board of Health if we move forward, partner with the county, make sure we're all in lockstep with any policy moving forward, and make that policy extreme. Don't go closing people down because they're not wearing a mask. Like make it that people have to do something pretty outrageous to get a letter.
I have a question. This is Felicia. Have you heard, is the county out of CARES Act money now after the initial grant that they were trying to give small businesses? Because I'm curious, it seems like all of the, basically one of the criteria for small businesses, it seems to be normally that, have you lost 25% of your revenue? What about these people who've lost 100% of their revenue and have continued to, like initially we lost 100% of our revenue for about 9 weeks. That's a lot. You still have people who are still losing 100% of their revenue, not just 25. It seems like those people should be bumped to the top of the list for everything. Has there been any discussion about that? At least
I think Jesse was jumping in on this.
I can
She looks very like she has the answer. So go ahead, Jesse.
This has been a very, very frustrating topic. No, they have quite a bit of money left over that they can utilize. We were told very specifically, even though we are at negative revenue right now, they are unwilling to give us any money because that's going to open it up to places, these like those larger businesses we discussed. If they give small businesses who are at 100% or more revenue loss, that will open it up to like the airline industry. They're going to have to give money to airline industry, the publicly traded companies that are in the county.
Yeah, it was a really weird response.
It was the biggest slap in the face. We were told that they were pretty much guaranteeing us that we were going to be given money. And then they told us that even though that money is available, they are refusing to do anything. And they're
saying that they're comparing you guys, like they're saying the airlines and them lost 100% of their revenue right now and have continued to do so?
They're giving us money because that will open them up to having to give the airline industry, really airline manufacturers.
They need, it's almost like they need to reclassify what small business is. And not that I'm making excuses that not everyone is hurting, but there's a difference between a business that has 500 employees and a business that has 20 or 50. To lump everybody into that group seems kind of crazy, typically in the sense where the larger ones have more capability to get funding. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, sorry, Felicia. Yeah, I was gonna say the solutions are very simple, but it's preventative rhetoric is all they're spewing. It's just ways why they can't do it. And I've responded back with here's how you can do it numerous times, and the conversation is still going. But it's everything we've gotten so far is this preventative rhetoric, and it's frustrating to say the least.
Yeah, I just going to jump in real quick. Like while you're talking, I am super happy we have Andrew on, right? Who's they actually being with the chamber, they have been here forever. They have really good relationships with the county and some of this feedback. I remember talking to Gary with some of the feedback from this group, and he actually responded, "We're like, that's really good. Let us know this type of feedback." I'm wondering if, because what you're saying, like, I wish I could do more to help, right? But I'm at the city level, but there are people who are hired to try to make things a little better and come up with solutions. And I'm just wondering, maybe we should in the future get someone from the chamber on these who can kind of just listen in and help deliver these concerns because I mean, this is, I wish I can't do anything at the city level, but it seems like an easy fix, right? Like, what if we got more allies who can kind of go in with those, who, and no offense to Adam, who have kind of a bigger cannon, right? Who understand the political dynamics and have been successful in policy changing.
For us specifically, Andrew and Gary both have sent letters on our behalf to the county and the state. And, we've had advocates from the chamber to visit Wichita and everybody. But it's falling on deaf ears right now.
Well, and Adam, I mean, you guys have a good association, the Independent Venues Association, that's been doing good work out in DC, trying to get Congress to, pass some relief. And, we'll keep pushing. I mean, obviously, I think that would be best if we could get something, passed to holistically help the industry and event venues, because they are kind of uniquely hurt by what's going on right now. So everyone's in, experiencing hard times, but it's just tough. You guys can't do shows. So.
Yeah, no, and we appreciate your guys' support. I mean, you guys have been awesome.
Yeah,
advocates.
incredibly helpful. Thank you so much.
So yeah, and I mean, yeah, we've been fighting this fight for 7 months now. I'm a full-time lobbyist now, and I hate it.
Yeah, honestly. Adam's our update on DC.
I just wanted, a show schedule and, some promotion.
But I mean,
that's all I want to do. But now we're promoting in the political realm, and we've been successful, but we haven't gotten any money. So, it's painful to see a lot of our friends and their businesses closing down, and that's happening every day now. So, we talk to people all across the country every day, and it's
at this point, it's multiple venues, and it's not just venues; it's all small businesses.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to that issue we touched on earlier. We see these large businesses like, in our community, the Dillons and the Home Depots and the Lowe's and all of these who are suppressing contact, or contact tracing or reporting. And yet our small businesses are doing everything we can, like Brooke was talking about earlier, how she's doing everything she can. And it's so frustrating to see the other small business down the street just flouting. It's the same thing, but on a much bigger level, that we see these larger businesses just doing pretty much what they want, and we are being held accountable.
And we don't want to demonize them. We just want a level playing field. I mean,
and that's the whole point of this call. Yeah, like what is?
And schools, throw them in there as well. I mean, schools are a big deal.
And
a whole other broken system. So
right. Yeah, I mean, there's so much complexity to this. I think that all needs to be taken into consideration when we're discussing enforcement, because without it, if a small segment of the community is singled out with enforcement of laws, we all know how that goes. And that's the, MO that's happened in America forever. And so let's find a way that that's not how it happens.
And that's what we're trying to do. And to be honest, and I say I'm working on, I'm not working on, sending schools letters and telling them they're violation of anything. But I'm reaching out and I'll just tell you guys, it's not supposed to be public yet, but I have no filter, as you all know. I'm reaching out to the schools and saying, if you are going to open up more, have more in classroom instruction, can we give you city-owned buildings and rooms so that you can spread out more, so we can have many pods? What's the city's role? Pretty much my idea is what's the city's role in helping us through this crisis? So can we give you resources like Century 2 so that you can utilize it for classroom space, so we have less, we don't have 40 people in a classroom, we have 15 instead. So we're working on schools. How do we help them lower the spread? And then the same thing with businesses. What can we do to make sure that any policy coming through helps, doesn't unfairly or unjustly target them? So yeah, we're trying to take this from multiple angles. But
there have been other cities that have.
Yeah, in Wisconsin specifically, there have been municipalities that have rented out the bars and places that have needed to be shut down for public safety and utilized those for school and for childcare purposes.
Or large event spaces or whatever. I mean, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, we don't want to do that.
Wait. Are you guys offering your space to be a school?
No, but there are.
There's a performing arts facility up in Wisconsin that we know well, it's a nonprofit, so it's not the owner, but the board leader who has he has received public funding to allow his venue to be utilized for educational purposes. It's happened throughout the country. And again, we don't want to do it. We're okay for now. We can handle one kid and that's it.
Right. And I don't mean to get off topic by talking about other stuff, but I just wanted to highlight, like, the goal is to bring everyone to the table and say, what can we do to help slow the spread as we buy time until we get really better medical treatment of this, right? Like, that's the goal. And my role here is I have very little power or authority, but usually I can call meetings. Usually I can kind of, I have a background in collaborative leadership. So, like, what can I do to try to connect dots so that we can get through this together? So that's why I was more referring to, but I didn't even think about, like, I wonder if there are places that, if there are places that are closed right now where, like, you guys, huge spot, and could we utilize a location for purposes of, and I guess probably have to come from the county, but purposes of helping us in a situation, and which will allow you some income for rent. Like, I didn't even know about that. That's great. Shoot me a link. Andrea shoot me some fake news from some blog called the New York Times. So he has a link in there, but yeah, go ahead and shoot another. Send that
so
to
Mayor,
me.
can I say, so I'm going to give you a different perspective here in the nonprofit sector. I think there's not a whole lot of nonprofits in here, but I've heard, I've been listening to all of these businesses and all of these different areas that talk about, worry about rent assistance and for their houses, food programs. I mean, the one thing that the county has done really well is that, there was a lot of funds that did go to nonprofits that are doing rental assistance for anybody who's $1,000 behind. Nonprofits are getting those help to those individuals. So maybe it's, again, not letting small businesses know that for their employees that these services are available. There's ample amount of food distribution centers, and I don't know, some of it is, hey, we've never used those before. I don't feel comfortable going and getting a food box, but I know that there is resources out there that these other nonprofits, myself included, have, really been able to provide additional services to the community that we focused in on. So I think that some of it may be, small businesses also need to pair up with these nonprofits who can get some of the additional resources that were earmarked solely for nonprofits to give back to the community.
But there might be a collaborative opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always collaborating with for-profit businesses. I mean, I know several nonprofits out there that are helping with that rent assistance program because it's really challenging. It was done by the state. They came out and said, hey, we have a ton of money left for rent assistance. You just need to be $1,000 behind. The one thing that they didn't do, which is sad, is that they did not include somebody who had a mortgage. And some of that possibly was due to the fact that they don't want to pay late fees. And so the landlords have to waive late fees, but they could get up to $5,000 in rental assistance.
Went past here.
So there's one right there. And I know several nonprofits that are working and willing to help with the paperwork for individuals to get those done, so they're done correctly, and work with landlords. So there is a lot of opportunity out there for help. And I just don't know if we're always looking at the nonprofit industry, because we are serving a lot of individuals.
Okay.
That was all.
That's good. I got I don't know what it is, but it's in 5 minutes. I completely lost track. It's across the street. I got to run out there. It's something over at the ribbon flag raising ceremony. I have no idea what that is. I have to go, but I apologize. This is helpful. Let's chat again. We can get maybe an email going. Again, I don't know how to say this any clearer. The goal is to figure out policy if things like hit the fan, right? Like what will be the plan if this thing jumps up, skyrockets to 25%, and all these orders come down? How do we get everyone on the same page, and how do we warn people to get on the same page before MINS or anyone else starts, shutting down places, or the governor or whoever? How do we try to get through this is my goal here. And it's difficult to have these conversations as an elected, because it's so easy to kind of take out, I think, a couple of sentences, or to reword what a tough decision is, to say they're doing this or that. And so I'm asking that we continue this discussion. We have no vote on Tuesday. I want to go back on Tuesday, start having these discussions, keep having them, but talk about, do we have a role and a plan if things get really bad, right? Like, what is our role to back up the county and to ensure that things don't we don't cause more harm than good. So that's.
I have just a quick question. Is it possible to invite some other restaurant and bar owners to a conversation with all of us, and maybe people try to work together a little bit, try to come together? I mean, I get that a lot of people are not getting along very well, but in order to find a solution, we're all going to have to figure out how to get along.
Oh yeah,
and come up with a solution together. Is that possible?
Yes. We could do that, have another summit. My goal, if we did this well, we would have rules that everyone agrees with. Like everyone, or kind of like the standard that people agree with, and they kind of keep each other in check. Everyone kind of, it's like any rules in any type of game, right? You kind of hold each other accountable. What's the agreement? What do, if we go into 25% testing and things are spreading and things are bad, what should we be doing? So that's, we should be.
I think it would just be, it would just be better, because I know initially when they were shutting down salons and barbershops and spas, it's being made, rules are being made by people who knew nothing about our industry. And I feel like this is kind of the same thing. We need to go to the source, and we need to be listening to people who actually live it every day, and multiple people. That just sounds like a better option to me. More voices, more brains together, and then showing that we all are trying to work together to come up with a solution for our community.
No, we could do that. That would be great. That is a lot. I think, I don't know if Mr. Spain knows she's turned the camera on, but it's funny. I agree that we should be bringing more people to the table and ensure that we get whatever plan, if there is going to be a plan moving forward, it needs to actually reflect, the industry as well. Like in legislature, we used to, you want to check with the industry before you make any changes, because you could have unintended consequences. And I think the salon situation early on this year is a perfect example of that, where they demonized a group and really kind of challenged that group, and they came back with policy that, really kind of showed that the policymakers were wrong, that this wasn't a risk. This industry can do this safely. So
agreed. I wrote an 8-page paper to the county on it, and not just from my point of view. I reached out to a group of 4,000 people in our industry within our state, and that's what you need to do. You need to get input from people that are living it every day.
Right. And I think there's a case in Wichita. My hairdresser actually went through this, where she had COVID and they tested everyone. No one had COVID, because of what they've done as an industry. It's, even if you accidentally catch this thing and don't know it because you're asymptomatic, you're not spreading it because the precautions are so good, right? There's a big risk in I think demonizing groups unnecessarily. It's better to bring people to the table and figure out, okay, what can we do to make everything safe? So I agree with you. Let's bring more folks to the table. But I just want to, I don't know how this is going to be interpreted out on social media or whatever. I think I read a tweet saying that I was going to go in and just start ripping liquor license off the walls of restaurants or something. That's not what we're trying to do here, right? We got to figure out a way to take on tough problems in a crisis situation together and have difficult conversations in public. And that's what today's the first step towards that. So I appreciate you guys being honest and actually last minute taking the time to check in. I know Andrew was probably gonna go jogging for like 7 miles, but instead he had to do this. Appreciate you jumping on last minute. He was really last minute, actually. I emailed these guys like 7:30 in the morning and said, hey, can you get on this call? Let's just be vigilant of emails. If we have ideas, let's bounce them back and forth, and maybe we can set one of these up with some more actors, some stakeholders in the community who might want some input on this that can help us out. In the meantime, I know I'm taking away with, and also pretty much the message from Adam and the Harkeys is keep fighting for more relief, because government I think should be, if we're going to ask people to shut down, we should be compensating them. So we got that kind of going on in the background as well. With that, I think I got to run across the street, so I'm out of here.
Can you
Thanks,
do that
Mayor.
with lights again like this? Can you do that?
It's my lights. Like, I don't know if you know this, Adam, but like my motion light shuts off, and I got to do one of these to get it back on. And yeah, you're right. That's gonna be the next like anti-Whipple campaign commercial. It's just me floating around like this, where like you can't trust this guy. Yeah, yeah. Now, like I know how this is gonna go down. All right, thanks guys. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.